soon. And I'd so love it if you would join me in our beautiful community of like-minded, like-hearted souls for a super powerful session during which we'll be doing the deepest, most thorough clearings of the Lightworkers Persecution imprint I've ever led. You can attend online via phone or computer, and you can register right now for a price of your choosing. I don't want anyone to be excluded from attending this special live event. Money is no obstacle here. During this special live event, you will very likely experience some of the most profound clearings and transformations you've ever experienced. And you will leave with a newfound sense of expansion, wholeness, and peace, perhaps unlike any you felt before. With over 5,000 beautiful souls from over 100 countries planning to attend, this could be one of the biggest, most important events of the year for healers, empaths, starseeds, sensitive souls, and lightworkers of all kinds from around the world. The shared benefit, worldwide ripple effects, and shift in the collective consciousness are going to be tremendous. It's going to be a life-changing, world-changing, limit-shattering, and timeline-shifting event for you, for all of us, and for humanity. If you want to join, co-create, play and heal with us, please click the link right now to register, and I'll so much look forward to seeing you there. Many blessings.
Don't blame your brain lazy if you're struggling hard with procrastination, because it might be a result of childhood trauma that you have absorbed unknowingly for years. Almost 72% of children face emotional abuse like destructive criticism, constant judgment, and unrealistic expectations that scar their belief systems forever. As a result, they develop anxiety, shame, and people-pleasing attitudes that stop them from taking action. But what if I say you can release
तो इसके
all these
पापा के तो
negative
नहीं है,
emotions and
अब गलती से आ
rewire your
गया।
subconscious mind? Then you can break free from limiting beliefs and achieve unlimited success and happiness in life. Hi, I'm Dr. Meghna Dikshit, a brain and performance expert for 28 years. I've helped over 2 lakh people rewire their thought patterns and achieve extraordinary success in life. And now, I invite you to join my 3-hour Ultimate Success Builder workshop, where you will learn how to identify the root cause of your resistance and limiting beliefs, release your past baggage and heal your inner child, overcome procrastination.
Basically, the British wanted to control the way we thought of ourselves, because that's the easiest way to control us. Indians were always ruled by somebody else. So, Aryans gave us history, and now the British are here to give us a software update. The intellectual class after independence was dominated by people who had actually collaborated with the British.
My way or the highway.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome once again to Kitabi Baatein. I'm Abhishek, also known as Books Wale Bhaiya. My guest today is a very special person, a top Indian economist, historian, and also now the Chancellor of Brooklyn Institute of Politics and Economics, Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal. Sanjeev sir, it's absolutely an honor to have you on Kitabi Baatein today.
Pleasure to be here.
I was looking at your profile and one thing intrigued me. So you worked as an economist. You studied economics at 2 very prestigious colleges, both in India and abroad. You worked for Deutsche Bank as a global strategist, and now you are with the government since past couple of years in a very esteemed position. In this career in economics, when and where did this passion for history arise?
Well, I'm a curious sort of chap, and I have an interest in history, but I'm generally curious about everything. So I'm one of those strange people who actually read scientific journals for fun, geeky as it may sound. So I have an interest in history as well, and one of the things I realized over time is that if you read history without economics and economics without history, you have probably not understood either of the two subjects. So at some point, it is important to begin. I began to read more deeply into history, and then began to find various other facets of it. but I couldn't find that information in the usual conventional books.
Right.
So I said, yeah, well, why don't I write it, even though I have no training in the subject. But
right.
I decided to write it, and for whatever reason, became bestsellers. I wrote a few more.
Absolutely. So it is said that Indian history writing has taken a different turns in the past couple of years. We have seen emergence of new historians like you, Vikram Sampath, J. Sandeep Burke, and Dol Sen Gupta. Why do you think there was a need for these new historians, a need for new narratives? What went wrong with Indian history writing that this course correction took place?
Current cycle of history writing starts with the colonial period.
Yes.
And of course, it was done with a certain slant. With basically, the British wanted to control the way we thought of ourselves, because that's the easiest way to control us.
Right.
Because if our self-image is controlled by somebody else, they can decide who we are and how we respond to various stimuli. And that's exactly what you want if you want to control a people. So they wrote history in a particular way. One of them was that, of course, Indians were always ruled by somebody else. So, you will hear, the story will give you the impression that the Mughals ruled India, then the British ruled India. The fact that there was a 70-year intervening period where the Marathas ruled India is sort of edited out. Similarly, you may be proud of your ancient history, but some white-looking people from Central Asia called Aryans came and gave you that. So at every stage, an attempt is made to show that some external party is giving you this, and you are kind of passive recipients of this. Aryans gave us history, and now the British are here to give us a software update. And we are kind of passive recipients of this whole thing. So that is something I can understand why they did. And by the way, people at that time understood that this was going on. So their alternative writings also happened. There are people like Sri Aurobindo, etc., or Swami Vivekanand, who are conscious that this is going on,
right,
and are pushing back. And it triggers others to write. Jadunath Sarkar, R.C. Majumdar, etc., begin to write other ways of thinking about our history. And then we become independent. And you would think we would.
मैं सिर्फ 3 घंटा आपसे मांग रहा हूं। इस 3 घंटे के अंदर मैं आपको एडवांस एक्सेल के फॉर्मूलाज के साथ एआई और चैट जीपीटी हैंड्स ऑन प्रैक्टिस के साथ सिखा दूंगा। तो एक हाई पेइंग सैलरी के लिए, बहुत बड़े प्रमोशन के लिए आपको आना चाहिए एडवांस एक्सेल के साथ एआई और चैट जीपीटी का सही इस्तेमाल करना। लेकिन 10 में से 9 लोगों को पता ही नहीं है कि एडवांस एक्सेल के साथ एआई और चैट जीपीटी को कैसे यूज किया जाए। आपकी इस मुश्किल को आसान करने जा रहा हूं। मैं सिर्फ 3 घंटा आपसे मांग रहा हूं। इस 3 घंटे के अंदर मैं आपको एडवांस एक्सेल के फॉर्मूलाज के साथ एआई और चैट जीपीटी हैंड्स ऑन प्रैक्टिस के साथ सिखाऊंगा। इस स्किल को सीखने के बाद आप बड़े से बड़े डेटा को चुटकी बजाते ही मैनेज कर सकते हो, क्योंकि आपके बदले काम करेगा एआई और सैलरी और प्रमोशन मिलेगा आपको। 3 घंटे के वर्कशॉप में आपकी सोचने का तरीका, रिपोर्ट्स बनाने का तरीका, फॉर्मूला यूज करने का तरीका टोटल आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस के हिसाब से चेंज हो जाएगा। हेलो दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है राज सिंह। मैं एक माइक्रोसॉफ्ट सर्टिफाइड ट्रेनर हूँ। पिछले 16 सालों से मैंने 300 से भी ज्यादा कंपनीज को ट्रेन किया है। एक दो कंपनी की बात नहीं कर रहा हूँ, 300 से ज्यादा। और अगर आप लोगों की बात करोगे तो मैंने 5 लाख से भी ज्यादा लोगों को पढ़ाने के बाद ये ऑनलाइन वर्कशॉप आपके सामने लेकर आया हूँ। ये कोई ऑर्डिनरी वर्कशॉप नहीं है कि ऐसे ही कोई भी पढ़ा रहा है। यहाँ पर पूरा एक्सपीरियंस के साथ मैं आपको प्रैक्टिस शीट दूंगा, आप उसे डाउनलोड करोगे। मैं एक फॉर्मूला आपको पढ़ाऊंगा, आप प्रैक्टिस करोगे। दूसरा फॉर्मूला पढ़ाऊंगा, प्रैक्टिस करोगे। पिवट टेबल पढ़ाऊंगा, आप प्रैक्टिस करोगे। डैशबोर्ड पढ़ाऊंगा, आप प्रैक्टिस करोगे। मेरे साथ आप प्रैक्टिस करोगे। 3 घंटे के अंदर आपको A to Z चीजें आनी ही आनी है। सर फीस नहीं बताए, फीस कितनी है? वैसे तो नॉर्मली दोस्तों इसकी जो फीस है 2999 है, मतलब 3000 के आसपास। लेकिन अगर आप इसे अभी ज्वाइन करते हो, स्पेशली आपके लिए एक लिमिटेड ऑफर है यहाँ पर 199 रुपीज, 200 रुपए में भी 1 रुपए। आप 200 रुपए के अंदर ये सारी चीजें जो मैंने आपको बोली हैं आप सीखोगे हैंड्स ऑन प्रैक्टिस के साथ। मैं आपको इनवाइट करता हूँ, नीचे दिए गए लिंक पे अभी क्लिक करो। दोस्तों अभी नहीं तो कभी नहीं। हो सकता है कि ये वीडियो काफी लोग देख रहे हों और वो इसे ज्वाइन कर लें और आपसे पीछे हो और आपसे आगे निकल जाए। तो सच में करियर में सीरियस हो, एआई चैट जीपीटी सीखना चाहते हो, एक बार खुद के ऊपर इन्वेस्टमेंट करो। नीचे दिए गए लिंक पे क्लिक करो और मैं राज सिंह आप लोगों को वेलकम करता हूं अपने इस वर्कशॉप के अंदर।
अपने ढंग से होली मनाइए और फॉर्च्यून से त्योहार की रौनक बढ़ाइए, क्योंकि फॉर्च्यून के हर रंग में है कुछ खास। फॉर्च्यून वाली होली।
We would have freed ourselves from the colonial history. Most countries, by the way, we are not unique. Everywhere the Europeans colonized or anywhere else colonize somebody else, they do this. So it's nothing very unique. What is unique to us is having become independent, we did not purge the old story. Now, there are many reasons for this. One part of it is that our intellectual class after independence was dominated by people who had actually collaborated with the British. And they became, in many ways, the new elite. So people who were working in the bureaucracy, for example, now the British leave, they all get promoted up. And so on and so forth. So the similar kind of things happens in our intellectual institutions. As the British leave, these are the same people. And people who had been collaborators were obviously also the ones who were most conversant in English.
Yes.
So they were also consequently. So this whole ecosystem in Delhi, particularly in Delhi, is the national capital, which drove a lot of this. Remember, the states are fluid at this stage. They don't even exist in the 1950s. They're princely states, things are being merged, etc. So Delhi had a much greater ability to drive national conversations than they would say today. So they just road-rolled a certain kind of narrative through the country. Now, in that, the old collaborators, i.e. new elite, had faced one obvious problem, that they had collaborated.
Yes.
Right? So now, they found it very uncomfortable with this idea that they had been an ancient civilization and they had been treacherous. So they were very keen on this idea that there was no India before 1947. Okay, so for them, that is important. It may be trivial to other people, but this is important to them. And they have already an existing body of knowledge with the colonial historians have left behind, that India didn't exist, and India is just some sort of a random amalgam of warring tribes,
right?
And somehow people from outside had given it some contours.
Britishers united
India. Now, so these guys now take that on because it's important to their self-image. So they now begin to craft a new narrative which builds rather than gets rid of the colonial story.
Right.
And it's quite, I won't take names, but most of the great historians after that. If you just do simple Google search, you will find they all came from either themselves were party to collaboration, or their immediate forebears had been part of the collaboration class. So they crafted this narrative that India did not exist. So they actually began to perpetuate this story, so that then they can show themselves in the light of having been just random people who happen to be working, and therefore you cannot question their motives or why they were there, because that was the first question everybody asked. Why are the direct descendants of people who signed up to the colonial system, why are they the guys? So now they began to construct this, and of course they did it under the intellectual umbrella of leftism of various shades. So there was the Nehruvian left, the communist left, and various other kinds of left, and it suited their agenda. So that is how basically this particular lineage of history carried out. Now remember, however, there was also the other stream which had existed in British times. They also were there. R.C. Majumdar was still alive in the 50s. So they were inconvenient and they also objected. So they were pushed aside politically with the full backing of Nehru and pushed out of the conversation completely. And why did Nehru back this? After all, if you listen to his own books and his own speech, I mean, when he talks about, talks about India as a civilization long suppressed.
Yes.
So in order to have been long suppressed, you had to exist. Right? So his own view up to that point was, yes, India was an ancient civilization, had a sense of itself. But afterwards, he also signed up to Gandhiji is the father of the nation, and that is where the starting point is. Because that suited him also.
Yes.
You see, now you can say India exists because, of one family, one father of the nation. So if there's father of the nation, you can have Chacha to the nation and so on. So that is how that new narrative came. And of course, he wanted to also show that that one stream of the Congress was the entirely responsible for India becoming free. So consequently,
सिर्फ सफेद बाल कलर करके खुश? Join the shine revolution. New Streaks Gel Hair Color. इसमें है कुछ ज्यादा hyaluronic molecules और kiwi extracts जो दे perfect color. और 3 गुना shine. Join the shine revolution. New Streaks Gel Hair Color. सिर्फ 20 रुपए में.
This Wi-Fi.
Time to act. Bad connection ruining your game night. Switch to a smarter Wi-Fi. That is huge. Full home coverage made easy with Act Smart Wi-Fi.
Inconvenient people like R.C. Majumdar have to be gotten rid of. And so the collaborator historians, they then latched on to this. They say, okay, we'll write you into the history and build you up in exchange for us being allowed to do the other things. So this is basically how narratives were done. I'm talking about history, but this was done across everything.
Across everything, right. And do you think they indoctrinated their theory or philosophy or outlook into schools and colleges? Because as we both agree,
absolutely,
historians R.C. Majumdar, Jadunath Sarkar, we had thinkers like Sitaram Goelji, they did write, but they were not much takers. And this
you have to separate out the R.C. Majumdar era from the later era. So the first lot were functioning under the British. Ironically, under British, they were able to do a fair amount of research and publish. And even in the very initial years, the 1950s. But from the 60s onwards, the system is completely cleaned up. I mean, there's almost like intellectual genocide in our universities and intellectual organizations. And nobody who wasn't hard left of some sort was left. So the debate was between whether you were Nehruvian left, or Lohiite left, or Marxist left, or within that where you were Chinese Marxist left or you were Soviet Marxist left. Those were the debates, but there's no alternative.
Right.
So this goes on till the 80s. Some point in time in the 80s, you begin to see people like Sitaram Goel, Arun Shourie, they emerge.
Yes.
But to a large extent, they are emerging, they are a break from the previous lot. They're not a continuity. So this is a new lot that is emerging. And they are in, not only are they a minority, they're in a difficult position. They're like almost rebels.
Yes.
Right? Because the whole system is completely taken over by that time. So they actually restrict themselves to critique. Okay? So if you read most of their stuff, there is an existing establishment idea and they are critiquing it.
Yes.
That's good at one level. The downside of this is that they are not really focused on an alternative narrative.
Yes.
So they say that their narrative has these holes.
My way or the highway.
Yeah. But no, so they're basically talking about the holes in the establishment narrative, but they don't really come up with an alternative narrative. And that is a big downside because in the end, one narrative is replaced by another narrative. It is not replaced by critique. You see?
Right.
So there was a limitation to that, which meant that there was no other writings. Now that has changed in this, what you described in the recent years, where other writings have come. So whether it's me or Vikram or whoever, Hindol or Sai, etc., whatever, new writings have emerged with new kinds of ideas being put forward. So that now a new set of narratives are being put forward.
Yes.
So this, in that sense, is a second break. So
yes,
there is the old nationalist writers, a break. Then you have the critique phase, break. and now you have new nationalist readers.
So if we talk of this era of historians, includes you, of course, you have written some very best-selling books. Your books are very well received by the readers. Yet there's some criticism that, oh, but he's not a proper or a trained historian, or Jason Devan
So
not a historian.
this is a classic example of people who try to protect their turf, particularly since they don't have any argument. Who cares? Argue with my ideas.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me where in my arguments am I wrong? When I put some argument backed by some primary data,
yes,
argue why it is wrong. It's like, why is an economist writing history? Well, then I can also, why is historians writing about economic history?
Right.
And is it the case that political history can only be written by politicians? I mean, this is a ridiculous thing. Anybody can write anything. The question is the quality good? By the way, all of knowledge is full of people, outsiders, making massive contributions outside their own field. So, economics, for example, wouldn't go anywhere without contributions from all kinds of other people, mathematicians and all kinds of other people who are not from the field. So, I think anybody who has done reasonable research and done it, and then of course you have many people say, oh, but this is not academic consensus.
Yes.
Now, I'm sorry to say, but once upon a time, the academic consensus was that the sun went around the earth.
Correct.
And once upon a time, not so long ago, the academic consensus was that all of humanity was descended from Adam and Eve. So what?
Finding the perfect dress, strappy heels and jewelry takes so much effort. पर Amazon पे it's totally effortless.
इस त्योहार Amazon पर मिले very quick suggestions on top fashion brands ताकि fashion हो effortless.
हर पल fashionable.
प्रिया, क्या बोला उसने पता है?
I will do yoga every day.
अर्जुन का सोशल मीडिया डिटॉक्स.
इन लोगों में ना विल पावर नाम की चीज ही नहीं है.
अपना अच्छा है. बोला कम शुगर खाएंगे. हम खा रहे हैं.
Cut down on sugar, not taste. Presenting Nick No Added Sugar range.
So all progress is based on, digging past whatever the academic consensus is.
Absolutely. So coming to your book, Land of Seven Rivers, you talked about history of India's geography. How did this approach you decided to take? I mean, history of geography.
There's no, first thing I want to do is to break these silos. The world doesn't function in silos. It is, these boxes are created by academics for their own pedagogical reasons. So history affects geography, geography affects history, which affects economics, if economics affects politics, politics goes back and affects geography. All kinds of things happen, right? None of these things are functioning in any silo. Unfortunately, most of writing is being done in this silo, particularly of the academic kind. And I thought, why not give it a different angle?
Very true. So you mentioned a couple of important points. When we talk about Indian culture, we take a starting era as the Saraswati civilization. Though of course more research is going on, maybe we may come up with something, newer era wherein we can say it started. It is said that since the era of Saraswati civilization, there's a continuity of Indian culture. How do you explain this continuity and why it is significant?
Well, first of all, you have to remember that it's only 100 years ago that all these Harappan sites were found.
Yes.
Okay. Before that, we did not have any conception of this. And the idea was there were some aborigines living in India. And these white people from the north came and they colonized. These people called themselves Aryans and they colonized them. Now, this is a story that white people said everywhere. And in fact, this is linked in some ways to what was happening in the colonial period. Whites were going and colonizing other people. So they wanted to basically state that this was the natural state of the world. So everywhere they went, they had some similar concept. In Africa, they had something called the Hamitic invasion theory, and so on and so forth. So they always had this theory, some lighter skinned people from somewhere came and colonized somebody else. Now they had this discovery of these Harappan sites, which are much older than what their fairly arbitrary date of 1500 BC for the Aryan invasion, which they also had, for very arbitrary reasons, come up with.
Yes.
But anyway, now what do you do? So then they said, okay, maybe these people had some sort of civilization going, but they were destroyed still by the Aryans. and there's no real link between the two. But if you go back and look at our traditional understanding of history, there is no such invasion. Our tradition, whether Puranik or any other, if you go back to the Vedas, there is no mention of any such invasion. So, for example, the Vedas mention a major river called the Saraswati. Okay, it's clearly the most important geographical feature in the Vedic texts. It also tells us it flowed from the mountains to the ocean. It also tells us that it lay somewhere between the Yamuna and the Shutudru, which is Sutlej. Now, today there is no river of that description, but even a simple Google search will show you there is a dry river bed.
Yes.
Yes. So, is it too much of a stretch to say that this must be the Saraswati? Especially when the Mahabharata clearly states that this river was drying up at the time of the Mahabharata. So, we have a river where you need to be. It is dry, but the drying up is also discussed. And importantly, there are a large number of Harappan sites along it. So, it must have been of some cultural, urban, political importance.
Right.
So, it all fits together to state that, look, this thing must be of some importance in our history and must correlate to the Vedas in some fashion, since the Vedas also mentions this river being very important and that, very important tribe called the Bharatas live on its banks and so on and so forth. So, this is an obvious thing, right? Now, if it doesn't fit all these other old colonial era descriptions, then what can I do?
Right.
I mean, if you just went with the primary evidence and took common sense points, this fits. Now, I don't care what the academic consensus is. Academic consensus may be clearly wrong. In any case, it's based on something arbitrary.
Yes.
I mean, if you ask any historian, why did the Aryan invasion happen in 1500 BC? Why not 500 years earlier or later? They will not be able to explain it to you.
Right.
And by the way, all the advantages that the Aryans were supposed to have against the local Aborigines is all arbitrary. They evidently, they had iron weapons against the Harappans who had bronze weapons. Well, it turns out that iron, systematically used, first time in the world, happens in India, in southern India, in fact, and then moves to the Gangetic Plains. So it was an Indian technology, first of all. Similarly, the earliest chariot known that has been dug up anywhere in the world is in India. It's in Sanauli, in Bagpat, not far. It's in the Gangetic Plains, not even in the northwest. It's in the Gangetic Plains. And just use common sense. Let's say there were all these people in Kazakhstan on chariots. Let's say such things were there. If you tried to come to India on these chariots, let me assure you, you would have abandoned them in the Hindu Kush.
Of course.
Okay, just try going over the Hindu Kush on your chariots and then try to fight any battles that you want to do in Punjab with all those rivers and the loamy soil. So, chariots are useful in Kazakhstan and they're useful in Haryana, West UP. They're not even very useful in Bengal. So they're only, people think that chariots are useful battle equipment anywhere and no, it requires absolute flat land which doesn't have too much, rivers and other obstacles.
Correct.
It's only, and it's dry. If it's very forested also, it's useless.
Absolutely. So in this Saraswati civilization, we often link it to the Hindu civilization. But again, there are historians who say that this Vedic civilization or Rig Vedic people have nothing to do with the Saraswati civilization or Indus Valley civilization. In fact, they also, express their doubts on the Hindu.
Millions of Hindus are using the Rigvedic chant of Gayatri Mantra and so on a daily basis.
Correct.
So how can you say that we have no link to those people?
Absolutely. But these are unfortunate narratives that have been fed.
Yeah.
So coming to the second motion of churn, you talked about King Ashoka, and you have a very different view from what is the generally held view. So when Ashoka is the king looked as a peacemaker, but you get different reasons. So what's your take on that?
So first of all, I want to point out that whatever I'm saying is based on exactly the same evidence that the conventional thought that Ashoka was a great king and a pacifist, and that he became a Buddhist because of his repentance against the after the war in Kalinga. Yes. The evidence for this story is extremely thin. And if you don't believe me, read the evidence yourself, because there's very little of it. There are a bunch of edicts which all of you can read. It will take you no more than a few, 1 hour to read all the edicts. There are not that many. And then there are a few other documents, mostly not from India, like Ashoka Vadana, which is a Buddhist text from Sri Lanka, and a few others. So it's 1 day's work to go through all the evidence there is on Ashoka. The rest of it is actually mostly made up.
Okay.
So now it's not like Romila Thapar was having breakfast with Ashoka every day. She has the same evidence. I have the same evidence. Okay. If you do this little bit of 1 or 2 days of research, you will also have the same evidence. Now you make up your mind. I'll tell you what. I have used the same evidence to come to the following thing. It is very clear that he was a Buddhist before the Kalinga war. That is very clear. There is an inscription clearly describing this. There is no traditional document, not even the Ashoka Vadana, no Buddhist document mentions that Ashoka became a pacifist or a Buddhist because of the Kalinga war. Okay, nowhere. Okay, the inscription clearly states that he was already a Buddhist at the time of the Kalinga war.
Yes.
So first of all, this entire story that he became a Buddhist out of repentance is basically bullshit, because the evidence is entirely the other way, number one. Secondly, the idea that he then became a pacifist is also kind of shaky. Because, yes, he does have a passage where he states that I am feeling sorry for having invaded Kalinga and carried all these massacres. But then, first of all, he doesn't say that he's shutting down the army and all that.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And even this repentance is not in Kalinga. If he was really, feeling sorry about it, a bunch of people to tell it to the Kalingans. So all his inscriptions, none of his inscriptions in Kalinga mention any repentance. This repentance is mentioned in an inscription far away in what is now Pakistan. And even in there, when he mentions, yes, I'm feeling bad about this, the next set of inscriptions, basically, next few lines basically says, however, notwithstanding the fact that I'm feeling sorry for what I did in Kalinga, if you forest tribes behave badly, I will do the same thing to you. So this is more like a threat.
Correct. So I think another attempt just to showcase that, Jainism, Buddhism, they arose because of the issues within Hinduism, out of the caste discrimination. That's why you saw.
But frankly, you can read the original writings of the earliest texts